Hi, I'm Lillian. Welcome back to my channel, Ink and Pages. Today's video is going to be a little update about my 2022 reading journal. I'm going to be talking about how I've been using it, the new things I've added, and also a bit about what has and hasn't been working so far. So we're going to start off with a flip through of all of the spreads I set up at the beginning of the year, and I'm going to show you how I've been filling them in. So we're starting off strong with this bookshelf spread because I don't really love how this page looks. I said in my setup video that last year I didn't give much thought to the colours I was using on that spread. So this time I was going to be more mindful and choose ones that would actually look good together. That hasn't happened. I've been colouring books with what colour the actual cover was, and it's too late to stop now. Well, I could stop and come up with a better colour scheme, but I'm not going to. I'm just gonna let it play out. But I think next year I am gonna change the color of these, I think probably according to the star ratings I give the book. So that's something I've already decided to change. Next we have my reading goals page. You can see which goals I've been more successful with. I have actually, with my very last read, completed my goal of 22 books this year, which is very exciting. Other than that, I am not close to completing any of my other goals. And in fact, some of them I've made zero headway into, but in terms of how this page was set up, it's still great and I don't want to change a thing. My 2022 reading log is filling up very nicely. I really like this spread. I don't know if you can see, but I actually changed my rating of Neverwhere from 3 stars down to 2.5, and I just stuck over a little tiny piece of paper. That's a little top tip of mine, is to have like a loose page from your reading journal that you can use if you need to go back and cover up any mistakes or changes. In the Loitertown notebooks like this one I'm using, the last couple of pages at the back have this like perforated edge so you can rip them out really easily. So I'm actually using a page I ripped out of my old notebook, and it's been really useful for mistakes like this. My reading tracker, I really liked the idea of this, but I'm already thinking next year I want to fill it in differently. Instead of just indicating which days I did any reading, I also wanted to show how much reading I did per day, I think by using different colours. So this is a nice simple version for now, but I will be changing it for 2023. However, my reading stats page, honestly, this is just the perfect spread for me. I like it, I don't want to change anything. I think the most useful stat on here is how many pages I read per month. I just love keeping track of that. My Buzzwordathon spread is another one that's been working perfectly for me. You can see I'm a little bit behind as I need to print out the cover of my May Buzzwordathon pick down among the sticks and bones, but I really like how this whole thing looks with all of the bright graphic yellow. My 2022 readathon spread is a bit shameful, not because of how it looks or how I've used it, but because it shows just how awful I am at sticking to TBRs. I mean, this is embarrassing, but expected, to be honest. So if I read a book within the readathon time frame, I colour in the little box next to it, and if I read it later on in the year sometime, I'm colouring in the box sort of halfway to show that I did read it, but not when I said I would. Okay, these next 2 pages I do wish I had done slightly differently. I originally filled these out with all of the unread books I owned at the start of 2022. But what I did and wish I hadn't was leave space to add new books on. And I wish I hadn't done this because there's no way I'm going to be able to add on every single new book I buy this year. And so I don't think it makes sense to have just a few of the new books on here, but not all of them. And on the other hand, what if I don't buy enough new books to fill in these blank books here? I don't like that. I wish it was a simpler record of my TBR from the start of 2022 and nothing more. So I'll be changing this slightly for next year, I think. Next is my genre tracker. This was a new spread for this journal. It's simple but effective. I like it. Don't have much more to say. My favourite book of the month, I also still really like this spread. You can see again, I need to fill out the May winner, but I really like how this looks. I think it looks really simple and elegant, which is exactly what I was going for. Now this list of new books is another reason I didn't need to add all my new books onto my TBR shelf spread, because they have their own place here already. So I use this as a checklist of all of the new books I've bought, and then I tick them off once I've featured them in a haul video on this channel, except for these 2 at the end because I forgot my own checking system and I ticked them off when I read them. So oops, but that won't matter once this is all filled in. Next, onto my booktube related pages. This tracker on the left I quite like. I think it gives a good overview of when I've been posting, but this page on the right immediately became redundant because my last bullet journal video was quite popular and my channel grew quite quickly for about a month, and I just had to fill in all of these trackers at once. So that was nice but pointless, and I don't think I'll have another subscriber tracker next year. And it's the same for this Bookstagram page. I like the tracker on the left, but this one not so much because it's just not filling up. So it is also as pointless as my BookTube one. So I think maybe next year I'll put my BookTube and Bookstagram trackers just together in a spread and leave it at that. So then onto the final yearly spreads from my original setup. This library book tracker has also turned out a bit pointless. I'm not writing down every single book I borrow, just the ones I finish. So I don't really need the little checkboxes I added. I just like how they look. But I'm kind of torn on whether this is an actual useful page for me. So we'll have to wait and see. And this page is where I'm tracking my reread and finishing of the Shades of Magic series. This was a goal of mine this year, to reread the first 2 books and then finally read A Conjuring of Light for the first time and finish the series. As you can see, I've already reread the first 2 books, and if you're paying attention, you'll know they were both my favourite book of the month I read them in. So all that's left to do is finally pick up the 3rd book. Okay, so that was a little overview of all of the spreads you saw me set up in my 2022 reading journal video. So now we'll move on to some stuff that you won't have seen before. So I decided to do the monthly sections, very similar to last year. Each month gets a little title page with a border of pretty washi tape, a little calendar, and then the habit trackers on the other side. The habits themselves for each month have stayed pretty consistent since I started doing them, so not much to talk about there, and I'll show you that in a second. What I did not plan on was using this reading journal to actually write down my thoughts on the books I was reading. I know that sounds super obvious and like it's the entire point of a reading journal, but it wasn't the whole point for me, and it wasn't something I was ever interested in until I suddenly was. So let's go back to the flip through of the monthly sections, and I will show you exactly what I ended up doing. So here's the January title page and the habit tracker. I've been doing this kind of setup for ages and I really like it. I decided to distinguish on the habit tracker between the different weeks by using colours from that month's washi tape. So you can see it's also got green and purple in it. So onto the book pages, as I'm calling them. There will be some spoilers for these books if you look closely, so consider yourselves warned. So the first book I finished this year was Kingdom of Ash. And I just had so many thoughts and opinions that I wanted to write them down somewhere. So I thought, like, why not in my reading journal? So this first page was kind of experimental. I didn't know at all what I was doing. This is the only page where I tried to do like a border of some kind around the book. I don't like how that looked, so I never did it again. And then I wrote down like a few qualities from the book. So here, rating, genre, format, how long I'd owned it for, and then when I read it. And then I just kind of splurged all the thoughts I had on that book, and it was really fun. So I decided to do the same for all the books I read this year. So these first 2 books have about the same amount of writing, but I didn't want to put any pressure on myself about always having to fill the pages. So you can see that for When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, I wrote a lot less, but not because I liked it less. In fact, it was quite the opposite. So on to February, I chose this washi tape with like spring blossoms on because I see a lot of that in February and it's just really pretty. So that month I finished 3 books and I just ended up leaving this last page blank because I'm not stressing about it. If it's blank, it's blank. You don't have to fill up every nook and cranny of a reading journal with content. And that is another tip I have. It's your journal and you can do what you want, so chill out. Okay, on to March. Again, exactly the same setup for the title page and habit trackers. Literally nothing has changed. These book pages all look much the same as the other ones. This book, Ignite, was actually a Harry Potter fan fiction, so it didn't have a cover, and I just drew in an empty box. And again, even though I really enjoyed it, I didn't fill out the page, whereas Spinning Silver was a 3-star book and I had a lot more thoughts on it. And it was about this point in the year when I realised I could use these notes I'd made in my journal as the basis of my wrap-up videos, which again may seem super obvious to someone else, but wasn't something I ever expected, so was a nice little surprise. Now April was a special month because we had the Magical Readathon hosted by G on her channel Book Roast, which was so much fun. So April has the usual title page and the habit trackers, but then I did 2 special spreads for the readathon as well. This first page, I'm not crazy about because I didn't have a plan for it, and then I only ended up finishing it like long after the readathon ended, so it doesn't feel that special. But I do like how I did this page on the right. So the idea of the readathon is your character is studying at a magical university and you have to pick a career path you're interested in, and then you study the relevant subjects by reading a book to fulfill different prompts. So I picked out 6 careers that my character might be interested in, and I made this little fold out thing that I really like. The next pages I am much more proud of. So these are the 4 characters I created for the readathon. Each one is from a different continent on this world and is a different fantasy race. And I wrote little bios for all of them and then stuck in everything together, and I just love how it looks. Astrid is like my main character, I guess, but they're like a little girl squad in my mind who become friends at the university and stick together. And I just think this readathon and the world and all of the lore is the perfect opportunity to be creative, so I just ran with it. So then on to the actual April books. It was a very mixed bag in April, but I managed to finish 7 different ones, so the most out of any month so far this year. For the monstrous volumes, I used this page not just for my thoughts on the book, but also to make notes about the actual plot. I always say that I love this series because it's so complex and interesting and far-reaching, but I won't pretend it's not incredibly confusing sometimes. And I used to have a notebook where I'd make notes to keep track of where everyone was and what mysteries had been revealed. So I also made some notes like this on these pages. Useless magic is a slight anomaly in this journal. I only finished it really recently in June, but I started it in April and almost immediately had thoughts that I wanted to write down, and not in a good way. So it's included in my April section anyway. And then once I'd finished it, I went back and, added in the dates read and added in a couple of my final thoughts. So at the end of April, I had a little self-reflection on the journal and basically worked out everything I've just told you about what was working for me and what wasn't. But I also decided that a third of the way through the year was the perfect time to add some more yearly spreads. Even though it was obviously no longer the start of the year, still part of my philosophy of it's your reading journal, you can do what you want, chill out. So in between the April and May sections in the journal, I decided to just spend 8 pages putting in some more spreads I was really excited to try, and I will show you them now. So starting with these 2 bingo boards. This one on the left is a TBR bingo of some of the physical books I own for ages and haven't read. This one I set up with the knowledge that I was starting it as of the start of May. So I didn't include books like Nevermore that had been on my TBR for ages and then I finally read this year because that would feel a bit too much like cheating. So these are all unread as of May 2022, and so far I've only completed 1. But this 2022 reading bingo, I did allow myself to check off with books I'd already got to earlier in the year because I didn't set it up immediately thinking, how can I cheat and include things I can tick off at once? Because I'd had the idea for this and some of the prompts ages ago, and it's sort of been brewing for several months. And then once I set this up, I then looked back at my 2022 reads and worked out what books I could use for what prompts. My rule is that a book can only be counted for one of these prompts, and it's like a mixture of book settings, authors, tropes and genres, and then some random 2022 related prompts, which were fun to come up with, but are going to be quite hard to actually fulfill. So no bingos yet, but I'm getting there. These next 2 spreads are just fun ones I wish I'd included at the start of the year. Read the Rainbow is pretty self-explanatory. I just made these little boxes out of washi tape. They are 4.5 centimeters tall and 3 centimeters wide. And then the alphabet challenge, again, no need to explain, but I love this idea so much. After I set this up, I went back separately through my previous years of reading to see how many I could tick off for 2021 and 2020, etc. It's just very fun. I really like how this has turned out, and it's very excited to now go back and fill them in. Next, I added a DNF page. Luckily, I've only had 2 of them so far this year, and I did have a page dedicated to Trouble the Saints back earlier in my January section because I felt like I had enough thoughts on it for it to be worth it. But A Girl is a Half-Found Thing, I read 12 pages from. It's definitely not enough to include properly, so I wanted a place I could mention books like that. And my anticipated releases spread is kind of an experiment because I am not someone who keeps track of new releases and immediately rushes out to buy them. Most of the books I read have been out for a few years already, if not longer. So I just wanted to set this up for fun and see how it would turn out. I did the titles for each month over washi tape. I don't love that in hindsight, and next time I'll probably just colour in the boxes in felt tip pen. And I also don't have that many books coming out this year that I am actively interested in, so it's not a very full spread, but I think I'm still glad that I did it, and I'll probably end up setting up a version of this in my reading journal for next year. And the last of the new yearly spreads I set up was a series tracker. So I have a tab on my reading spreadsheet where I keep track of the series I'm in the middle of, but I saw this really simple bullet journal spread on TikTok by a user called Journal by M, which I really liked, and this is based on that. What I learnt after setting this up was I actually need about 3 times as much space as I set aside for it in order to fit in all of the series I'm reading. So that's a lesson for next time. So then we're back onto the monthly sections again, starting with May. I found picking a washi tape for this month really hard, especially because I have a pretty new pack of floral ones that I'd never used before, so I didn't know how they'd turn out. So at the very back of my journal, I just laid out some swatches of each of them and then I could choose from there. And also at the back of my journal, this is another top tip from me, I've literally dedicated the last page to just be a pen testing page, not so much to see if the pens work, but to see exactly what colour they are on this paper. And I'd really recommend this, it's really useful. So back to May, you can see I have forgotten to print out the cover of Every Heart a Doorway to stick in here, but you know, it's fine, I'll get to it eventually. I actually have quite a lot of book covers already printed and ready to go for when I eventually read them. I just keep them tucked into the journal a bit further back. So as we flip through, you can see I finished 4 books in May, unfortunately ending with these 2 disappointing ones. And finally we get to June, and you can see how my habit tracker is like building up partway through the month, and also that I made a mistake here and had to stick over it. I have already finished 2 books in May, Useless Magic and How to Kill Your Family. But like I showed you, I already have a page for Useless Magic back in the April section. So now I just need to do a page for How to Kill Your Family. I've actually already collected most of my thoughts on that book and I've already talked about it in a wrap up, but I am going to fill out the page for you now. Again, spoilers will probably abound, so don't look too closely if you actually want to read this book. So that is my updated 2022 reading journal. I've been having a great time with it. I'm still having a great time this many months in. It's never felt like annoying or like a chore I have to do each month or every time I finish a book. It is actually just still very fun. So if you are interested in starting a reading journal, I say just go for it. Just give it a go and see what happens. You can always abandon it if turns out you hate it. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video and I'll see you in my next one.